By the time anyone realized OneCoin wasn't a real cryptocurrency, more than $4 billion had vanished, and its creator, the self-styled crypto queen, Ruja Ignatova, had disappeared on a flight to Athens, and she hasn't been seen since. Picture this: a packed conference hall, flashing lights, pumping music. On stage walks a woman in a designer dress and dark red lipstick, promising to beat Bitcoin at its own game. Her name? Ruja Ignatova. According to the FBI, Ignatova capitalized on the global excitement around cryptocurrencies to draw in new investors, promoting her project, OneCoin, at large-scale conferences and events around the world. She sold the dream hard, a chance to get in early on the next Bitcoin, but easier, faster, and more profitable. Slick brochures, online campaigns, roaring crowds. It all looked like the future of money. OneCoin was marketed as a revolutionary digital currency that anyone, anywhere, could use to build wealth. And people believed her. Investors from the UK, Uganda, the US, and beyond poured in money. The BBC later estimated that in the UK alone, OneCoin investors lost more than $100 million. Globally, Vinci Works, a compliance firm that studied the case, says investors lost over $4 billion, making OneCoin one of the largest crypto-related scams in history. But in those early days, no one was talking about scams. They were talking about opportunity. Ignatova presented an impressive resume, leaned into the hype around crypto, and focused on audiences who didn't fully grasp how cryptocurrencies actually work, but didn't want to miss the next big wave. According to the FBI's Inside the FBI podcast, she deliberately targeted people moved more by her charisma and marketing than by the underlying technology. That combination, complex technology plus a compelling storyteller, was the perfect setup for what came next. To understand how OneCoin pulled in billions, you have to look at how it was sold. According to the FBI, the pitch worked like this. An investor would buy a OneCoin education package that supposedly came with tokens to mine OneCoin. Those tokens were marketed as your ticket to generating more coins and more profit over time. Then came the twist. Investors were encouraged to turn around and sell those same packages to friends, family, and anyone they could reach. For every new person they recruited, they earned a commission. And when those new investors recruited others, the original investor got paid again. The FBI and its Inside the FBI podcast describe this very clearly as a multi-level marketing strategy. Existing investors sold OneCoin packages to their networks, who then repeated the process in their own circles. Vinci Works, in its analysis of the case, says OneCoin essentially operated like a classic pyramid scheme. New investors' funds were used to pay older ones, and the promised returns were largely illusory. The marketing was relentless: seminars, hotel presentations, glossy videos, and get-rich-together language. One Scottish investor, Jennifer McAdam, later told the BBC she was so convinced that she persuaded her closest friends and family to put their savings into OneCoin. She says that together, they lost more than $200,000. This is how the system scaled. It wasn't just Ruja selling OneCoin. It was your cousin, your colleague, your pastor, your friend. And that social trust made the numbers feel safe. But the entire house of cards depended on one claim being true: that OneCoin was a genuine cryptocurrency, powered by real blockchain technology. That claim did not hold up. On the surface, OneCoin talked like a cryptocurrency. In reality, it wasn't. According to Vinci Works, OneCoin was never actually a real cryptocurrency. Unlike Bitcoin or Ethereum, it had no public ledger, no blockchain verification, and no independent way for investors to confirm transactions or the coin's value. The FBI's Inside the FBI podcast goes further. It says investigators found that OneCoin used many of the terms associated with virtual currencies, but not the actual practices. OneCoins weren't mined using computer resources the way standard cryptocurrencies usually are. Instead, OneCoin claimed to have a private, centralized blockchain that only the company could see. That meant only one coin controlled the record of transactions. Only one coin set the price. investors couldn't independently verify the supply, demand, or real volume of activity. In other words, if OneCoin said the coin was worth a certain amount, investors had to take their word for it. VinciWorks says this structure allowed traditional fraud and money laundering techniques, shell companies, offshore accounts, and opaque corporate structures to hide behind the buzzword of crypto. Crypto itself wasn't the crime. It was a tool to cloak an old-school deception. The key problem is that everything depended on trust in the company and its leader, not on transparent technology or real market forces. According to the Inside the FBI podcast, OneCoin's value was determined by the company rather than by open market demand. When you strip away the marketing, you're left with a centralized database only one party controls, and millions of people sending money into a system they couldn't see inside. For a while, the hype covered the holes. As long as fresh money poured in, OneCoin could keep paying out enough to look legitimate. But there were warning signs, big ones. According to the FBI's Inside the FBI podcast, OneCoin was marketed as a new virtual currency, but was allegedly a fraud scheme from the start. The structure hinged on constantly getting new investors eager to get into or expand their cryptocurrency portfolios. Victims later described how secrecy and pressure were baked into the culture. The FBI warns that any investment secretive in nature is probably a scam, and specifically cautions people against investing based on someone's personal talent or charisma, rather than underlying facts. Yet that's exactly what kept OneCoin going. The charisma of Ruha Ignatova, the energy of the seminars, and the fear of missing out on the next big thing. The BBC reported on people like Jennifer McAdam, who realized too late that what she had promoted to her friends and family was a scam. She told the BBC she has seen firsthand the toll this fraud has taken on so many lives, calling the resulting financial ruin unbearable. As questions mounted and regulators in various countries began taking a closer look, the image of an unstoppable crypto empire started to crack. But before law enforcement could put handcuffs on the crypto queen, she made a move that turned the story from financial scandal into a global manhunt. Behind the scenes, investigators had begun to close in. According to the FBI, Ruha Ignatova served as OneCoin's top leader through October 2017. On October 12, 2017, she was charged in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. A federal warrant was issued for her arrest that same day. The case was serious. A superseding indictment followed on February 6, 2018. Charging her with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and securities fraud. Wikipedia notes that the potential penalty tied to the Ponzi scheme-related charges could add up to as much as 90 years in prison. But by then, Ruha was gone. According to the Inside the FBI podcast, investigators believe she may have been tipped off that she was under investigation. The FBI says she traveled from Sofia, Bulgaria, to Athens, Greece, on October 25, 2017, and has not been seen since. In 2022, the FBI added Ruha Ignatova to its 10 most wanted fugitives list. The FBI and her Wikipedia entry both confirm she became one of the very few women ever to make that list. The BBC later reported that U.S. authorities increased the reward for information leading to her arrest to $5 million. Meanwhile, the fallout for investors dragged on. The BBC reported that more than 400 OneCoin investors are now part of a group claim in London's High Court, led by law firm Mishcon de Reya and spearheaded by Jennifer McAdam. According to the BBC, attempts so far to secure significant compensation have largely failed, even as courts issue freezing orders on assets linked to the scheme. VinciWorks notes that Ignatova's disappearance doesn't mean the end of accountability. Her financial footprint is still being pursued, and regulators continue to unravel the complex web of shell companies and offshore structures around OneCoin. But for millions of investors, the simple reality remains. The money they thought they had in OneCoin is gone, and the woman who promised it to them is still a fugitive. On the surface, the OneCoin story looks like a crypto problem. But the core lesson has nothing to do with blockchains and everything to do with how you make financial decisions. According to VinciWorks, the OneCoin saga shows how the hype around cryptocurrency and weak regulatory oversight can combine to create enormous, complex, global frauds. Crypto wasn't the crime. It was a convenient costume for an old-fashioned pyramid scheme. So what can you, an everyday investor, take away from this? First, if you can't independently verify how an investment works, you shouldn't put serious money into it. With OneCoin, there was no public ledger, no open blockchain, and no way for ordinary investors to confirm the value or supply. If everything depends on trusting a company's internal numbers, you're not investing, you're handing over control. Second, be extremely wary of opportunities driven by secrecy and charisma. The FBI, in its Inside the FBI podcast, warns that any investment that's secretive in nature is probably a scam, and that investing based on someone's personal talent or charm rather than facts should set off alarms. OneCoin thrived because people trusted the person on stage more than they trusted their own doubts. Third, be careful when your social circle becomes part of the sales pitch. According to the FBI, OneCoin's multi-level marketing strategy turned ordinary investors into recruiters, encouraging them to bring in friends and family for commissions. As the BBC's reporting on victims like Jennifer McAdams shows, that can turn a bad investment into a personal tragedy, ripping through entire communities. Finally, remember that complexity is not a substitute for transparency. OneCoin wrapped itself in technical language about mining and private blockchains. But real investments should become clearer the more you ask questions, not more confusing. If there's one sentence you remember from the OneCoin collapse, make it this: do not invest in anything you can't explain in simple terms and verify independently without relying on the charisma of the person selling it to you. OneCoin shows that the real risk isn't crypto itself. It's trusting complex, opaque promises and charismatic sellers over transparent, verifiable facts. If you can't independently understand and check an investment, especially one pushed through friends and family, you shouldn't put serious money into it. If you want more real stories of fortunes made and destroyed, and the concrete money rules hidden inside them, hit subscribe. And before you chase the next big thing in crypto or anywhere else, pause and ask, could I explain this investment and how it actually makes money to a skeptical friend? If not, save this video, walk away, and protect your net worth.